and I think we agreed on this standpoint that is to give some sort of discipline, but it's also to get you ready for the real world. Because there's certain children that, as they get older, yes,
No, in the
once they
real world, you're not going to get spanked. The real world
no,
requires... Wait, hold on, please. No, stop, because you're making the same dumb argument the other person made. So, the real world, preparing for the real world, do you know what is incredibly important nowadays in the real world? Communication. You should be able to talk to your child and explain to them why what they did is wrong and why they shouldn't repeat that behavior. And you should be preparing them for the real world by teaching them adequate communication, not what? If you are late in your report at work, your boss is gonna spank you. What? The world ain't a porn movie, dude. You're not preparing them for the real world by spanking them. It sounds like you're talking. This is just like Return to Monk.
You don't understand the ingenuity of children. Sometimes
I have kids. You don't. So shut the fuck up. All right, you're like the reoccurring villain, because what is this now? Like our third debate? Fourth?
Yeah, I think actually like fourth. Yeah.
All right, so yeah, spanking your kids is bad. Change my mind. How are you going to change my mind today?
All right, so I'm gonna give you some pros to spanking and see if you would maybe agree or disagree.
I will write them down. Go for it.
Okay, so one is, obviously we don't have like huge, large scale research that shows spanking to be effective, but there is like some studies that suggest that like spanking administered by loving, well-intentioned parents, like it can't be like obviously like abusive parents that enforce spanking, but like loving, well-intentioned parents and a non-abusive disciplinary can actually be an effective form of punishment.
Okay.
So obviously you'd have to go look at these studies to.
I would like to know if you had one of those, because I looked around and I didn't see that anywhere. So
okay, so
I could have just not found it because I wasn't intentionally looking for it. So I'll look for it. But what are the other pros?
I can go find it, but yeah, I'm gonna tell you the other pros as I'm looking at these. So another one is the fact that like different. Obviously, all children are different, so they take different forms of punishment, very different. So like, let's just do like boys and girls, for instance. Like, would you agree that like maybe a boy would be more responsive to spanking for a punishment than a girl would? Like, a girl would be more responsive, easier responding to yelling or raising a voice than the boy would.
Yeah, it's possible, but really yelling at your kid isn't good either, so I would be against that too. We've all done it, okay? We've all had a problem with, we've all had a bad day where we've raised I've yelled before and I don't like it. I always feel bad. But like, that's not a thing. Of course,
I don't say everyone should yell at their kid for every time they're punishing their kid, but this is
But you're saying if it were a choice between yelling at the girl and spanking the boy, it'd be better to spank the boy because he'd be more likely to respond to that. I got your argument. All right, what's the next pro?
Basically like the fact, like the shock factor part of it. Like I said, it's like I don't advocate for people spanking their children all the time, but when it comes to something like really bad that your child's done that you absolutely do not want them repeating, I think like that, in that situation, spanking your child, not like beating the shit out of your child, obviously, we're talking about like, spanking them on the ass or something. This is going to make them more remember that because they're shocked at the fact that they got spanked, because this isn't something you do all the time. Like, I'm not advocating for spanking your children all the time. It would depend on what, but like, definitely is.
All right, so are these your three pros? Because I think we can go through these pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the thing is, first and foremost, I would want to see which study you're talking about the loving spanking. And I would also then say, too, that even if you were able to produce this study, which I genuinely don't know if it's there, if you could find it, I'd be really appreciate it. But even if you could produce this study, I don't think that means spanking is now okay. I think that you could still argue it's bad, because even if it deters bad behavior done in a certain context in which the parents are particularly loving, etc., it still has negative outcomes down the road. So that's why I brought up the study about showing the maternal spankings still predicted worse behavior from like if a kid was spanked at the age of 3 to when they were 5, they were worse behaved, even if that parent was particularly warm and loving. So it can still lead to negatives there, and it's still traumatizing regardless. And then if we also know that timeouts, when done right, can be effective, and that doesn't involve hitting your kid, then all of a sudden this one study maybe showing that it can be effective in like some context just doesn't really seem that relevant, because it's not just about if it can help deter the behavior in this one instance. It's about, is it beneficial in the long run? So does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. I do understand what you're saying, but um, so you're basing that off of the studies you're because I do know like there is studies
There's
that say
way
this.
more evidence right now. There's near universal agreement amongst the studies on kids who were spanked or other forms of corporal punishment, and it's all found negative outcomes for the kids who were spanked. All of them. So even if there were one study, even if there were a couple studies, like I can agree, or I can conceive of a household in which it's a loving household and the kids are spanked and that's just how the discipline goes. But aside from that, everything is fine and the kids don't really have any major issues. Like I could see that, sure, it's conceivable. I'm not saying every single kid who's spanked is going to turn into like a fucking serial killer, but by spanking them, you are making it more likely that they can run into risks later on down the road. And I mean, the thing that I think is most relevant still is like the sexual aspect to it, which is really what I find to be the most disturbing. Do you disagree with that?
Sorry, the what aspect?
The sexual aspect of it.
What do you mean? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how much of my stream you were watching before you joined, but well, we were just looking at this thing talking about how the way that like blood flow and arteries work, when you spank the butt, you're also sending blood to the genitals. So whether you intend to or not, you are leading to like a form of arousal, which is why kids who are spanked, when they grow up, are more likely to have spanking fetishes. So you'd think maybe that in of itself is like really fucking creepy, right? Then all of a sudden you're like, ew, I don't want to do that to my kid. That's actually creepy
Yeah,
as hell.
I definitely want to go look. Yeah, I wasn't here for that part of your stream. No, I definitely want to go look at that. I don't know how big of a connection there actually would be there, but
Someone said you turned weird as fuck. I didn't turn weird as fuck by talking about and raising awareness of something that is weird as fuck.
yeah, like no, if there's like actual like scientific proof of this, yeah, okay, I would I, I'm just saying for like, remember, I'm not saying we should spank our kids for every form of punishment,
No, I
but
know.
like, okay, but then you kind of like, because you did say that like if it was a loving household and you agree that it could be used as a form of punishment and not be
I said I could
abusive.
conceive of that, but the data we have doesn't actually suggest that it benefits it. It doesn't seem that it mitigates the problems down the line.
But okay, I understand that. I understand that part. But you do say that in that situation, spanking your kids isn't bad, right?
No, it's still bad.
Even though nothing negative is coming out of it.
Something negative is coming out of it. Because by spanking your child, you are, even if it's in a loving environment, since the studies show that even when spankings are given in a loving environment, they are still, the behavior, like from ages 3 to 5, does not improve. In fact, it gets worse. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
you're making it less likely that their behavior is actually going to improve. Spanking encourages not an improvement of behavior, but rather just hiding the bad behavior from the person giving the punishment. And then tack that on top of the now sexual element to it. It's just a hard 100% absolutely not.
Yeah. I don't. I like I said, I have to look into that. That yeah.
I'll send it to you really quickly because it's not like it's not going to be like a study about blood flow, right? So it's admittedly it's an article in Slate, so I know that sound instantly is like, hold up, Slate's kind of a joke, but they have some good citations in there.
Okay. Okay.
So I'll
Yeah.
send this to you just because this talks about what the scientists talk about. They talk about the nerve tracks and everything.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to look into that for sure.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
maybe it'd change my mind.
All right, cool. Well, hey, I sent it over to you, and yeah,
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look at that stuff and then yeah, and like I'll get these. I found one here, but this one's kind of shit. Like I'm gonna get a couple more of them together for you, and we can talk on this again.
okay, sounds good, man.
All right,
Thanks.
all
Bye.
right. Take care, man.
Wow, an actually nice civil conversation. What is going on? What's happening? I'm good. So, yeah, spanking your kids is bad. Change my mind. What's up? You want to change my mind?
Yeah. Okay. When it comes to spanking, if you're, let me start off this way right from the jump. Hitting kids just randomly, smacking them and stuff like that, that is indeed negative.
Okay.
However, if your child is rude, disruptive, and attacking other people's kids, maybe they need to learn a little bit of discipline.
Well, I agree they need discipline, but that discipline does not need to come in the form of hitting them. Like that's a thing. That's the whole reason. Like I said, is at the beginning, my kid had a really big problem with hitting. So sometimes I would pluck his hand as like a don't do that as like an instant thing. But even that, I pretty quickly stopped doing it because I realized I'm like, wait a minute, I'm telling them not to hit by. I mean, I wasn't hitting them, but like spanking would be. You'd be punished. Wait, so they hit somebody, so you're going to punish them by hitting them? What? Like you can absolutely discipline them, and they need discipline if they're hitting people, but that discipline doesn't need to be physical pain.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I see your standpoint on that. But there are some children that, even when the parent, whether they are around or not, that have that kind of anger. There's been several children that, even when the parent is there, if they don't like that other child, the other person, they're going to smack them, they're going to kick them, they're going to yell at them.
Yeah, and
And
spanking
not
increases the risk of more aggressive behavior as that child gets older. So that would be even the worst. That would be a worse response. If they're acting out to that extent, that of all times is when it calls for a fucking timeout. That's when you pick your kid up, and whether they're throwing a tantrum and kicking their legs or not, you walk them back to the car, you sit them in their seat, and you sit there with them until they calm the fuck down. Then you talk to them and explain why their actions are bad, and that's why they have to be brought away from all their friends now. And then you say, all right, let's try again. I love you. Give a hug and go back out there.
it depends on the child
No, it
because
doesn't. No, it doesn't. And I'm sorry, but if you're going to say the kid is acting out and being aggressive, so you need to respond, I get the argument that maybe it'll get them to stop by like a stun response. But you know what else would get them to stop by a stun response? Slapping them in the face. And that wouldn't be okay either, though. So just getting them to stop by a stun response is not really, it doesn't really matter because you're ultimately doing way more harm in that case. Just pick them up. If the kid is
Let's
small
pick
enough that
them
you're
up.
still spanking them, you should be able to pick them up.
Okay, how old is the child?
How old do you think it's acceptable to, when do you think it's no longer acceptable to spank a child?
No longer spank a child? I would say by the time that they're about, this may be coming from a personal experience, but by the time they're around 9 or 10, there's no way you should be spanking your child at all at this point.
Yeah, I agree with, I agree with that. I would say it's never acceptable, but I obviously agree with the age thing too. Yeah, so I guess if they're like 8 or something, you could, maybe that'd be a little bit more difficult, but you can still pick them up and move them.
Yeah, it depends. Is there basically, I mean, is the couple married or not? Or are they a single father? Or are they a single mother? And how is the child with their actual mentality able to respond to what the parent is saying to them or not? Because some kids They just don't give a damn. They just don't.
Yeah, but if the kid is old enough to understand, then you should be able
Old
to
enough.
wait. You said that if the kid is old enough to understand, then can't you reason with the child?
Yeah, because some kids, when they littler, when they younger than that 8 or 9, some of them they just don't care. Let us also not forget about the
But you
children
know what they
when
will
they.
care about? They will care if they are picked up or brought out of the situation, the environment. That will bother them. They don't want to be isolated. That's why timeouts are effective, again, if done correctly and not done in excess. Like you're kind of saying that if a child is younger, it's okay to hit them. And then another thing
No,
I
I'm
heard too that I think is a really good
not.
question to ask is just that, like, if it's not okay, it would not be okay to strike the butt of an adult. And if that happened, it would be sexual assault or harassment if it happened in like the
Yeah,
workplace or something. So why is it okay for small kids, especially now that we know that it actually still has like a unintended sexual response, which is just ugh.
you didn't know that, Hunter? I knew that for years.
And you're still okay with it?
I wouldn't say I'm okay with it. It's just that some of these things that you're citing is things that were cited like in the early 2000s, like 2004,
So you're just
2003.
now you're just acting like a psychopath then because you're saying that you know about this, but you're still in favor of it.
Research is dated. I mean, it's old, man. It's already been.
I don't care if it's
It's
old or new. You realize that what you're saying is you are outing yourself. You're saying that I know that it has sexual implications. However, I think this behavior, this form of punishment is still okay at times.
spanking among adults that is consensual is fine. Eh,
We're talking about spanking your kids, dude. Obviously, yeah, two adults engaging in spanking or whatever is fine. Do you have
So you
kids?
don't want them? I was a child. I seen it myself.
Okay. Well, there's a joke there that I could make, which is that this explains a few things, but I also kind of feel bad because I think that you might be just a little confused here. Like, why
I'm
are
not
you
confused.
if you know that this has this creepy fucking implication, why are you still okay with it?
And spanking of the child is basically, as you said, yes. And I think we agreed on this standpoint that is to give some sort of discipline, but it's also to get you ready for the real world. Because there's certain children that as they get older, yes,
No, in the
once they
real world, you're not going to get spanked. The real world
know,
requires. Wait, hold on, please. No, stop, because you're making the same dumb fuck argument the other person made. So the real world, preparing for the real world. Do you know what is incredibly important nowadays in the real world? Communication. You should know how to
that's not
talk. Hold on, stop. You should be able to talk to your child and explain to them why what they did is wrong and why they shouldn't repeat that behavior. And you should be preparing them for the real world by teaching them adequate communication. Not what if you are late in your report at work, your boss is going to spank you. What? The world ain't a porn movie, dude. You're not preparing them for the real world by spanking them.
He's not going to spank you. No, you're right. He's not going to spank you. What he's most likely going to do is fire your ass for constantly being late and not doing your report and your job.
You can teach them to not be late and to be dedicated to their work without spanking. And you can prepare them for the real world without spanking because the real world does not involve spanking.
All right. Okay. Just remember that every child that's around you, not all of them have that upbringing, and not all of them have that notion. You want to avoid your child becoming like Junior. Remember that show, Problem Child, back in the 90s? You don't want him to be a real life Junior.
I don't remember that, no. Okay, yeah, and
It's a
so what were Junior's big problems? Was he really aggressive?
Junior. It's a comedy, but it has some equation to real life.
No, I know. I'm
Basic-
asking because spanking contributes to negative behavior in the future. That's what I'm trying to communicate to you. Is if, even aside from the sexual thing, which in my opinion is more than enough to be like, this is disgusting and I'm never going to do that. But even if we want to talk about it from that perspective, it contributes to a higher likelihood of aggressive behavior in the future. People who were spanked as kids have higher rates of spousal abuse than people who were not spanked as kids.
I was just trying to make my point earlier about that, yeah, he was angry. Yeah, he was angry, and a whole lot of other things.
So
It wasn't just
spanking wouldn't
anger.
have helped that. It could have made it worse. Do you understand that?
And talking to him, unless you were his dad in the movie, specifically wouldn't help either, because the kid did whatever the hell he wanted.
Then you do something else. This is most likely. Okay, so you realize that just whacking them on the ass is not going to get them to stop with like a long-term behavioral problem. Most likely, if there's a long-term behavioral problem, it doesn't justify it, depending on how old the kid is, but like there's got to be something with the parents too, which is why I say it's lazy parenting. If you're the guardian or the caretaker and the kid's not listening, so you resort to just beating the fuck out of them, whacking their ass, what? Huh? Like what? How does that help? What does that do? It's nothing. Like you'd have better luck just putting them in the room at that point.
What will you request they do? Let's say they do it your way, Hunter. They picked them up, put them in the corner, gave them a timeout, and explain what to do. And what if they go on and do it again? They keep doing it.
Yeah, then they would have to go into timeout again, or they would lose an entire privilege. So if it's like every time you go to the mall, you start running up to strangers and yelling at them. You've been in timeout 3 times for this and you keep on doing it. You're no longer going to be allowed to go to the mall. That would be the next step. Not, all right, now you've escalated this to where I must physically hit you. Huh? Just, it sounds like you're talking, this is just like Return to Monk.
You don't understand the ingenuity of children sometimes.
I have kids. You don't, so shut the fuck up.
I've been around kids.
Okay? I don't know if that's good or not to hear, but regardless, you don't know how to tell me about anything with parenting or kid stuff. You don't have kids yourself, so you have no personal experience, and clearly either not educated on the literature whatsoever, or you are, but you're actually doing no, because you're doing the fucking thing that I was making fun of people. You're being the guy who beforehand I said should be locked up in the zoo. You're being the person who is seeing the evidence and the harms of this form of discipline, but is still clinging to this weird notion that it should still be acceptable in some circumstances. Why? If there are better methods of discipline that doesn't involve disturbing, creepy sexual implications, and also if there are other forms of discipline that actually result in a changing of behavior rather than a worsening one, why the fuck are you clinging to spanking kids? Hello? Are you still there? Did I yell at you too much? Wow. Wow. I don't know if I scared him off. Maybe the FBI showed up at his door. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what happened. But I do know that anybody who is aware of this information, but still clings to this form of discipline, I think that you are actually like a psychopathic, maniacal maniac. Like you should be the star of the next Stephen King film. Spanking your kids is bad. Change my mind. Are you here to try to change my mind?
Well, not really change your mind, but I want to kind of take a little bit of a different approach.
Okay.
Because it seems like you're conflating it with like abuse, and I really don't think that spanking should be considered abuse.
Well, so I would say I don't think that it would be fair to say that spanking is sexual abuse, for sure. Sexual abuse specifically, I think this is too far. I think that there are a lot of parents, again, who spank their kids. They're not getting like sexual gratification out of it. I think that would be going a little far. Saying it's not abuse, it would really depend fully on the context, but it's hard for me to see how inflicting physical pain on someone who you otherwise could reason with is not, at least on the, very top, like the beginning part of the spectrum for abuse.
Yeah, I can understand that. So my mom is a social worker. So the way that they currently classify abuse is like if it leaves a mark. And in my experience, and I know that's anecdotal and chat's not going to like that, but in my experience, like it's never left a mark. It's just It's just like a little bit of the tap, make you realize like, and I understand that they're not going to like that either, but that's just how I see it.
Well, yeah, but the whole like it didn't leave a mark. Like honestly, it may have not left a physical mark, but it's probably going to leave a mental mark because spanking is not a little like pluck on the hand, right? It's not a little like a little hey, like a tap on the shoulder, get their attention kind of thing. It's like you're inflicting pain on them purposely and usually repeatedly and in a calculated way. It's either in a very calculated way, which makes it weird, or it's in a way that's like completely unhinged, which is also super weird.
Yeah, I can see that. So if you want to consider spanking abuse, even if it doesn't like necessarily leave a mark, how would you then, like if there's no evidence of it, like how are you going to call that child abuse if you cannot prove
I'm
that
not
it
really
happened?
I'm not really arguing that it is or is not child abuse. I'm just arguing that based on the information we have, it's not a good thing. It's not a good way to discipline a child. So we can argue about the semantics of how we define abuse or whatnot. I don't think hitting children is okay. So whether or not it's abuse, we can even put aside. I don't think it's okay. I think you ought not do that.
All right, and that's understandable. And while I do get that, like, there's different and like you may consider it like better ways, and I know that a lot of people consider it better. I feel like it actually doesn't cause that much harm. And again, another anecdote, like it's never like hurt me.
Do you mind if I ask how old you are? People are. You don't have to answer. It's just I'm not sure.
I mean, how young is too young? I'm a teenager, but I'm a young teenager.
Okay, yeah. I mean, both people in chat were saying that you sound really young. It's just it's interesting um, that someone who might still be a child is defending this. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just there's it's fine. You don't need to tell me your age, but I will say that I understand that your personal experience might be that you turned out fine, but there's two layers here. First of all, as you've probably heard me say to other people already, your
Yeah.
experience doesn't speak for everybody at
Yeah.
all, which is just obviously you know that. And then the other thing is that it might negatively affect you in ways that you don't know yet. Like, not every way in which I was negatively impacted by being spanked as a kid I knew about. It wasn't like all like this conscious like PTSD flashbacks or some like weird crazy shit. It was just that like as I got older and older, I realized like, wait a minute, that screwed me up here, or like that contributed to like this weird feeling, or that was kind of bad this way, or like, man, that makes me really uncomfortable when I look back on that. So like I don't it might seem fine to you still, but I think that it's probably with time you're going to realize more and more that it's not fine. And now with the information we have, it seems pretty evident that it's just downright creepy.
Yeah, all right, I get that. Also, I like the point that you made about how like it can lead to aggression in the children because I do see that much in myself. But I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that's necessarily from the spanking. I don't feel like it would be, but I mean, I guess it could be, but
Right.
I do
Well,
see the aggression in myself.
it's a chicken and an egg situation, like which came first kind of thing. But like the best refute to that is just that there's this really good longitudinal study which found that kids who were spanked, young kids, their behavior continued to worsen over time. So even if initially they started off more aggressive to begin with, they continued to show worsening behavior even with the spanking. So it was obvious that the spanking was not helping at all, and if anything, was only contributing more so.
Yeah, I can understand that. My little sister, she has autism,
Mhm.
and like I told you, like my mom is a social worker, but she supports spanking. And when my little sister acts up, she does get spanked, and I can see where some of her behavior has gotten worse. So, like I said, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just I wanted to bring up kind of the why it shouldn't be like abuse argument because I wanted to take like a different approach a little bit because I agree with you on everyone else because a lot of those people were a bit much.
Well, sure. And I mean, I feel like there would also, to me, it like raises red flags. I'm not trying to get into anyone's business, but like it does raise a little red flags because it's like, I don't know how autistic you're talking. Like, are they capable of understanding? Is it like inflicting pain because they can't understand? If they can't understand, why are you inflicting the pain?
It's usually she knows that what she did was wrong, and she knows that she wasn't supposed to do it, and she continues doing it, so then it escalates.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, whether or not it should be classified as abuse, I think is definitely a discussion to be had. But I think that whether or not it meets the semantic criteria of abuse, it's pretty clear, and the vast amount of data shows that spanking is just harmful. It increases negative behavior. It strains parent relationships with their kids. It makes it so that you're way more likely to have really just, it's very creepy in like with the long-term sexual implications and whatnot.
Yeah.
There's a hell of a lot of problems with it. So even if it doesn't meet the like official criteria, that's not really my argument. I'm not concerned whether or not it's technically abuse or not. I'm just concerned with the fact that it's bad and it's still happening way too much.
Yeah. Also, somebody in chat, like right before I got on, was mentioning like the religious argument.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't think that it's as much with religious people, because isn't there like entire thing that they're supposed to be like nice, I guess?
The religious thing, there are verses about like the rod or something, so Christians will try to use that to justify spanking, but it's very selective. So while we're in a culture in which spanking is like a contentious issue, they appeal to the Bible about it. But for issues that are like done and settled, they never bother to look at the Bible. Like, so when slavery was a thing, Christians were citing the Bible to defend slavery. And
Yeah, I've heard you argue that before.
right, and so they lost that one, so they just kind of ignore it, and now it's the next cultural thing. Whatever's the next cultural thing that they happen to be in is whatever they're going to find in the Bible that somehow says it's bad or something.
Yeah, like homophobia and transphobia. I see that a lot.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well,
All
I do
right,
appreciate
so-
you coming on here. Especially I know that you're pretty young, so it takes some guts to come on here. I just hope that you'll continue to listen to the streams and yeah, like again, whether or not it's considered abuse, I think that you should just really think about this as the very obvious harms it causes. And that would probably be the main thing that you should focus on.
All right, yeah. Well, before I leave, I just want to say that like I am a fan, and thank you for having me on, because I do really like your content.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for coming on. See ya.
All right, bye-bye.
And it's also funny too. I saw somebody in chat earlier saying like the spanked generation will be like, well, I was spanked and I turned out just fine. It's like, no, grandpa, you fucking didn't. And it's also funny too, because it's like the boomer generation specifically that are like, they lack so much self-awareness. It's bizarre. The boomer generation specifically, like they'll say in full sincerity, like, I turned out just fine. And like they cannot comprehend that, like, no, you are fucked in the head. You are a terrible parent, and now you've left your children with scars that they need to deal with.